Hello, I'm Matthew Armstrong, and I'm going to introduce you to an activity called repeated listening. Um, this is the first video in the series where we will look at fluency development. If you haven't seen the first video in the series, I strongly recommend you to go watch that because it's important to understand what fluency development is and to understand that we can use fluency development with all four skills: speaking, reading, writing, and listening, not just speaking. So we're looking at our big chart, and keep in mind that, again, all four of these strands need to take up approximately 25% of the time of a well-balanced language learning course. So fluency development, we are using what we know to go faster or get familiar with a text that we've gone over before. So for example, it's easy to see with speaking and writing with fluency development, we might be going faster, but even reading, you can see that reading you can go faster, but listening, how do you listen faster? Well, you can't unless you change the audio in some way. But there's a little more to fluency development than simply going faster. All right, now let's think about what it means to be a fluent listener or to what is developing fluency with listening. So a fluent listener can receive a spoken message in real time and process that information without effort. So there's some kind of mental representation of the language in the mind, and that system is just processing meaning without any effort. So if you're developing fluency with receptive skills like reading or listening, that means that you're not consciously thinking what each word means and processing it like that and somehow arriving at some conclusion of what the whole sentence means. It means that as you hear each part of a phrase, each word, each phrase, you're anticipating what's coming next. That the phrase or the word, it comes into your mind, immediately meaning is attached to it, and your mind is anticipating what could be coming next. Which means that, for example, when we were looking at this strand, meaning focused output, we were thinking about, we were trying to stretch ourselves, as in trying to experiment with vocabulary, experiment with how we express ourselves to express new ideas. And meaning focused input, we're focused on receiving information and we are looking at individual words and then seeing them in phrases and making sense of that. We're doing the opposite with fluency. It's like we know something already in the mind, and with listening, it's like you are anticipating what's coming, and that meaning is automatic. So, here are some examples. I bet you could anticipate what would come next. So if you heard me say, this video will give you some useful, I bet you're thinking tips, advice, suggestions, activities, something like that. So as you hear that sentence, you're taking into consideration the context, and um, you're not just receiving this, you are also uh, using what you know about the world to anticipate what comes next. Uh, that would be a new sentence, of course. I've never told you that sentence before. So imagine if this sentence were in a course book. The first time you saw it, maybe you had to read over it slowly and think about it a bit and then continue reading the page. But with fluency development, you would hear that again, and this second and third time, you would process that information much more quickly. Therefore, you'd be developing fluency just by repeating the material. So, listening is uh, very important for spoken interactions, obviously. If you can't understand your partner, then the speaking is not going to go very far. So we need to improve our listening, not just understanding new information or uh, just figuring things out slowly. We need to get more automatic with listening. And in order to practice our fluency with listening, there are three main ways. So you listen to the same content several times, so that's repeated listening. This is basically the same words, known words. Uh, you should know all of the words in a fluency activity. So you have known words and it's in the same context with the same phrases. Now, you could also practice fluency listening by choosing some extremely super easy content with listening, and you should know all of the words. All of those known words will be in different contexts and phrases. The third way, of course, is you take an audio that you're familiar with and you change the speed of it. So you could import an audio into Audacity and you could make it a bit faster, 10-15% faster. If you change the speed too much, though, it will be incomprehensible. But changing the speed of the audio does add difficulty. But you don't want it to be too difficult. You want it to be about I'm processing and understanding this information. So let's increase the speed, practice listening like that, and then you're able to increase the speed even more. Let's look at repeated listening. It's an activity that you would do with a text that you're already familiar with. So this text could come from uh, the meaning focused input strand, for example, or it could be a text that you are really familiar with from the transcription activity in language focused learning. So this repeated listening, as with all fluency activities, it shouldn't have new language features. It shouldn't have new and unfamiliar vocabulary and grammar. It needs to be well within your range so you're not working too hard with it. It needs to be something easy that uh, you can practice at a certain speed. So it shouldn't, there shouldn't be anything you don't understand. So repeated listening means you're going to take a text from another part of your course, or it could be uh, a short audio that you're only going to use for fluency development if you know it's really easy. But it would be better to simply recycle it from another part of the course. So you could take an audio from the read and listen activity or the transcription activity and listen to it many times. Um, Keep in mind this repeated listening. It is important to have fluency activities, and it's important to have language focused learning activities and meaning focused input activities, but you have to strike the right balance. So if you're balancing the four strands, you'll find meaning focused input with listening. Yeah, so the read and listen activity. So that's 1/8 of a course, right? And language focused learning, that's a quarter of a course. And so a quarter of that quarter would be transcription. So that's 1/16 of a course. Fluency development, uh, the same as language focused learning, it's spread across four different skills. So that means a quarter of that quarter, a 16th of the course is spent with repeated listening. So that means you'll be spending twice as much time with meaning focused input with listening. So if you're spending 2 hours a week with read and listen activities, then you should spend an hour with language focused learning and an hour with fluency development with the listening activities there. If you do that, then make sure you keep a balance with all the other activities on the course. Okay, I'd just like to stress again that listening is not the only part of a well-balanced language learning course. This was just a look at repeated listening, and it's a good way of recycling listening texts or audios from your course and putting them to good use. It's really good for you. Thank you for watching and stay tuned for the next few videos in the series. Thank you.